2022 competition briefing with a wee bit of a twist because it's got a Scottish focus. I'd like to give a really warm welcome to Kelvin Davis from Innovate UK and Daisy Chapman-Chamberlain from KTN, who will give us an overview on this year's competition. Last year, 3 Scottish companies were successful in receiving funding, and we're really pleased to have Hamish Geddes here today from Lens Labs, who I'm going to speak to at the end of the session just about his journey through First of a Kind 2021. So a warm welcome to Hamish too. Thanks also to our other speakers. We've got Scott Prentice from ScotRail, Alistair Camelford from Transport Scotland, Paul Tallett from Network Rail, Magnus Conn from Caledonian Sleeper, and Maggie Simpson from the Rail Freight Group, who are all also very kindly speaking today too. So it's a packed agenda. We'll have a short break in the middle, because just to go and grab a cup of tea or maybe even your lunch, just because we've got quite a few speakers, and I hope that works for everybody. I think Sarah just put a note out there. We're going to record the session for people that can't attend today. So if you wouldn't mind keeping your mics muted so that we get a clear recording, that would be fantastic. If you do have any questions, though, please do use the chat facility. And at the end of each session, we'll have a short Q&A session with the speaker. So please do use that. We'd love to hear your questions. I'm sure everybody knows me by now, but in case not, I'm Shona Clive, the project lead of the Rail Cluster project in Scotland. I've been working with the team at Scottish Engineering since August 2020. So we're about 21 months-ish into the Rail Cluster project. It's been an absolute incredible journey. I've loved it, and working with Transport Scotland and Scottish Enterprise, I think we've made quite good inroads into creating an engaged community of about 900 people. So 900 people have signed up to us and are part of the cluster. That's about 500 companies and 200 SMEs. So we've got a big audience, which we're delighted about. I'm also vice chair. I always say this because I think it's really important. I'm also vice chair of Women in Rail, the bigger organisation. I was regional lead of the Scotland region, but I'm now vice chair of overall Women in Rail, and I'm really keen on EDI issues, and which have an impact on the cluster as well, in terms of attracting the best talent into the sector. So as I said, the Rail Cluster started in August 2020. It was funded by Scottish Enterprise, and we're also supported by Transport Scotland. We've got several aims, but our key purpose is to connect SMEs in the engineering and manufacturing sectors in Scotland looking to diversify or grow their business in the sector. So we facilitate the necessary links with companies that, like some of the companies that are here today, like Network Rail, ScotRail, rolling stock manufacturers, across the whole scope of rail services in Scotland and beyond. We're not parochial enough to think that everything is in Scotland. There's big projects and opportunities elsewhere too. So although the project does have a Scottish focus. We also another aim is to raise awareness of opportunities across the Scottish Rail network. The context, just very quickly, of the whole project is the Rail Services Decarbonisation Action Plan, issued in July 2020, which aims to deliver net zero passenger services by 2035, which is not far off really when you think about it. I think that's probably, we've got lots of SMEs in our community from a variety of backgrounds, from different industry sectors. And I hope some of them are here today. In fact, I know they are. These are companies that potentially have got great ideas and innovations that they might bring into the Scottish rail sector to drive change and efficiencies and green solutions. As part of what we do, we spend an awful lot of time with these companies, around about nearly 700 hours of support to SMEs, finding out where they think they might fit and where we can help them. So it's been a great journey, and in everything that we've done on the Rail Cluster so far, if you haven't had a look, it's well worthwhile having a look in the Scottish Engineering website under the Rail Cluster page. We record all our webinars just like this one if you ever want to look back on any. So I think that's way more than enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Kelvin Davis from Innovate UK.
Thanks, Shona. And the first thing to say is thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to a number of organisations in Scotland. It's been terrific to work with you, not just for this round, but also for the last round. And to set the scene, Scotland is doing very well in bidding for first-of-a-kind technology, for first-of-a-kind applications. And in the last round, we funded 3 projects in Scotland. Hamish can tell you in detail about one of them. And the other 2 were delivered by where I can never pronounce that, but it was a tourism app on the Highland Main Line, and also Ballard Motive delivered a hydrogen powered vehicle technology. So Scotland is very much in the fore in terms of bidding for applications, and winning 3 out of 33 is 10% of the programme clearly, and that sees Scotland punching above its weight in terms of population. So well done, Scotland, and let's see if we can repeat that for the current round. So the competitions Shona's invited us to talk about are live now. They're open, ready and waiting for your applications and for your great ideas. And these are the 3 on the screen now. And what I'm going to do is quickly take you through the scope of these competitions, and I'll mention that in the slide pack that we've left with Shona, there are some details of how to apply. So the admin side of our processes, and I don't intend to go through that, but the slides are available to you to help you as a bit of an online manual if you need that later on. And ultimately, if you do decide to apply, which we hope you will. So the 3 competitions on the screen: low emissions and a greener railway, speaks for itself. Rail freight, a theme which is very topical post-COVID. And finally, cost efficiency and performance priorities for a reliable railway. And I'll say more about those in a second. Thanks, Shona. So the background. Daisy, who will speak later, and I'll introduce in a moment, and myself are essentially working on behalf of the Department for Transport in Westminster to deliver this 6th first-of-a-kind competition. And there's a bit of a paradox in there. We've thought of renaming it, but the competition brand is now recognised. And we deliver this on behalf of the Department for Transport in the UK. So it's a well-recognised brand, and we've been doing this since 2017 with increasing levels of success. Thanks, Shona. Introductions. I'm going to speak first, and then I'll hand over to Daisy Chapman-Chamberlain from our sister organisation, KTN, and Daisy can explain how KTN can help with the latter stages of the process. Thanks, Shona. The first thing to say is that the 3 competitions are all SBRI. If you don't know what SBRI is, don't worry too much. It's Small Business Research Initiative, but actually it's one of the worst named programs ever in the history of programs, because it doesn't apply just to small businesses, and it's not about research. But let's hope you agree that it is an initiative. So essentially, it's a funding mechanism which is available to all. It is pre-commercial procurement, so we can fund you to develop an innovation, but not to the point of sale. It requires a lead customer, which is why we're privileged to have on the call today a number of representatives from customer organisations, so from ScotRail, from Network Rail, etc. The objective is to deliver an outcome, so not to develop R&D for R&D's sake, but to address a challenge on the railways in our case. And those challenges need to be well defined. And the thing that appeals to all applicants is 100% funded. There are pros and cons to that, though, because it does mean that you sign a contract, and once you've signed that contract, you need to deliver on what you've committed to as part of the programme. Thanks, Shona. Key features listed on the screen. I won't go through them all. It is an existing framework. The contract is with a lead applicant, but you can involve others through subcontracts if you need to. The IP will remain with yourselves, the applicants, and in terms of eligibility, anyone can apply, no limit on size or type. Very much open to organisations not currently engaged in the rail sector. Research organisations, so universities and RTOs can apply, and all organisations must demonstrate a route to market. The focus is on getting products, in our case, onto the railway network to benefit the railway operating companies and the customers, be that a freight customer or a travelling passenger. Thanks, Shona. In terms of how you apply, there will be some assessment of your commercial, this isn't a word, but commercializability, the value for your money and the potential benefits. It is a contract, as I said, to deliver on what you've applied to do. You must include VAT, We don't mean by that that you pass on VAT receipts to us. It means that because this is a service being supplied under a contract, you need to add VAT to your invoices to Innovate UK. It must not include profit. Explain what you're trying to do. We cannot increase costs once you've been awarded a contract. It is a contract like every other contract, it's fixed price. And please familiarise yourselves with the contract before you bid. If you don't like the contract when you receive it, unfortunately, we can't change it. Our terms and conditions are non-negotiable. So please review the contracts which are available as part of the competition documents and check before you do anything else that you are happy with that contract. Thanks, Shona. So I'll quickly introduce Innovate UK and the wider organisation UKRI. Unusually, I'm in Innovate UK today, so I'm in Swindon. First time I've been here this year, but Innovate UK is based in Swindon as part of the wider UK research councils, and we're one of 9 councils occupying the same building just by the railway station in Swindon. Thanks, Shona. And our role in the UK is to drive business growth. Simple as that. We drive productivity and economic growth by supporting businesses to develop those ideas which are a little bit too risky for them to develop them themselves. So that magic spark, those novel innovations that could be high risk, high gain, and that's really where Innovate UK operates, particularly focusing on SMEs, but in fact, in the case of this competition, available to any and all with good ideas to help the railways. Thanks, Shona. Summary in one slide. We're how old are we now? 15 years old, and in the 15 years we've invested over 2.5 billion in the economy through match funding, taking that to 4.3 billion, and delivered roughly £6 or £7 for every pound invested, so total of 18 billion, and some other stats in the boxes below. Thanks, Shona. Right, I'll quickly take you through the scope. Many of you may have seen this online. I hope you have. The challenge of the competitions is to deliver innovations to address 3 broad categories of innovations that industry has identified are topical and relevant, indeed critical for the railways. And these are low emissions and a greener railway, so tagging onto the government's decarbonisation targets, which are coming at us very fast, enhancing rail freight. So very topical post-COVID, that the passenger trains are relatively empty, but we're all doing online ordering. So rail freight is very much to the fore. And finally, a more complicated and protracted challenge, which is loosely called network performance priorities. And I'll say a bit more about that as we get through the scope. As I've said, Innovate UK is privileged and proud to deliver the programme on behalf of the Department for Transport, and the Department for Transport remains the customer for the programme. Thanks, Shona. The next slide is fine if you want to move on. Back one, please. Thank you. The common objectives of the competition, if you've been in before, and Hamish can tell us about the challenges that this delivers later in his presentation, that the objective is to deliver a demonstration in what we call a live railway environment. So not in a lab. You need to work with railway customers, with railway partners to put something on the railway. That is not easy. We all know how difficult that can be. But it is critical to this competition because we're looking to get things onto the railway and we want to get there as quickly as possible. To achieve that, you need to work with railway partners. We have a number on the call today who can help and to explain how they can partner with you and the process for getting their support. You should always de-risk the aspects of the competition before bidding. There's no point in signing a contract to deliver something to the railways and then ultimately find you can't do it. That helps nobody, it doesn't help us, doesn't help yourselves. So please do de-risk whatever you can beforehand. And finally, if you've bid into first of a kind before, we have a new requirement for an evaluation activity. What do we mean by that? We basically mean that once you've delivered your demonstration, you need to spend a bit of time measuring the benefits that it provides. Let's not assume that they're self-evident. Let's not assume that it's obvious to a potential customer why they should buy it. the evaluation activity requires you to measure something from your demonstration that will help the commercial case for the uptake of your technology. Thank you, Shannon. So the three themes, I'll quickly take you through these. You've probably seen them online. The first is low emissions and greener railway, and there's only 3 topics in this one. On the next slide, please. And these are solutions to reduce emissions of nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, particularly when diesel engines are idling. We all know the scenario. You're in an enclosed space of a UK station, and diesel engines are left, right and centre, churning out unpleasant matter into our breathing air. Secondly, passenger trains that can be powered by the AC electrification and charge a battery, and then running battery only on unelectrified sections. Could be very relevant to Scotland, but also relevant across the UK, where there are typically mainline electrified sections of running, but also branch lines that aren't electrified. And the current electric stock can't therefore make the potentially shorter runs onto the unelectrified sections. And finally, battery or hydrogen powered freight trains. Emphasis on the word freight. The thinking is that there is now sufficient solutions available in passenger, but the power requirements of freight trains take us into a different domain. What we're launching in this competition now is phase 1. Phase 1 is 3-month studies to write the feasibility study for what you would propose to do in phase 2. So it's essentially writing your own application for what you'd like to do in phase 2. And the deliverable for your phase 1 is the feasibility report. Thank you, Sinead. So if you apply successfully into phase 1, then only those teams will be eligible to apply for phase 2. And what you'll do in phase 2, which is a much bigger programme worth up to 740k, is to develop what you said you'd do in phase 1. And that therefore will need to be a demonstration in the live railway environment. But clearly for phase 1, we're just looking for a report. And your phase 2 activities must include the demonstration event and the evaluation activity we've spoken about. Thanks, Shannon. Here's a summary of the eligibility. I'll go through this once, but the eligibility loosely applies to all of the 3 competitions. Any organisation, you can work by yourself, but you need to have the appropriate skills within your team, which I'll outline in a second, but only 1 contract. But you need to have in your project an owner of railway assets, so somebody who can be contractually involved in your project to deliver your demonstration, somebody who knows how difficult it is, so an experienced railway organisation, and a railway organisation that has the potential to become a customer. And the reason we include those 3 is we know it helps you with your commercialisation later on. They could all be one organisation, or indeed those 3 organisations could be yourselves. You might be an organisation that meets all of those requirements already. And you need a potential integration partner. And critically, you need to have a letter of support signed by a senior individual from a potential railway customer organisation. As we've said before, the word senior is not clear cut, but we've learned before that a letter from a junior member of a team doesn't actually necessarily mean that you'll get the support you need. So please get a letter of support from as senior a person as you can within your railway customer organisation. Budget up to 60k, including VAT. Projects up to 3 months, starting in October, finishing by the end of December. So it's a short, sweet programme, but hopefully to a number of the organisations in phase 1, it will lead to much bigger prize in the phase 2 competition. Thanks, Shannon. Second theme, rail freight. On the next 3 slides, we see a lot of bullet points, please. I'm not going to read them all out. Here they all are. Please scan them for yourselves, but they are all identified by industry as having relevance, and Maggie Simpson is going to speak briefly today as well to endorse these themes and to provide a slant appropriate from the rail freight group. Second slide, please, Shannon. There we go. Leave it on the screen for 5 seconds and then move on to the next one. Okay, and then in terms of the eligibility on the next slide, exactly the same in the top box. So everything I said before still applies. The difference here is that these are bigger projects. So between 150k and 400k, up to 12 months, which means that you still have to start on the 1st of October, but you have to end up by the end of September next year. So these are bigger projects than we've funded before. We have the luxury of a 3-year spending review, so we can allow slightly longer projects, but still keen to get these delivered to the railways to deliver the benefits that they promise. Thanks, Shanna. And the third theme is an interesting departure for us. These are loosely grouped as network performance priorities for a reliable railway. What are we talking about? We're talking about a number of themes which result in poor or degraded service for the customers of the railway, be that passengers or be that freight operators. And they've been derived from conversations with the Rail Delivery Group. So they are detailed here, but there's a lot more detail in the competition documents, which is available through a link at the bottom of this and the next slide. I won't go into detail, but planned resilience and recoverability, right time, right traction from the depot, deterioration in network response to external events, including trespass and suicide, operating staff availability. Next slide, please. Weather and seasons and climate change, more efficient use of access for infrastructure maintenance and removal of organizational or systemic blockers. Loosely, the first 6 of these are those multiple factors on the railway which lead you or I getting to a station and looking up at the departure board and it says train delayed or train cancelled. So they're all designed to address those. The 7th one is a little bit different, which is systemic blockers within the railway industry. And we're really intrigued to see what solutions we get offered in this space. So we left it in. It's potentially a slightly softer, less technology focused theme, but we've left it in. So please have a look at that theme and think what your organisation could offer to help address the details in the scope documents under that bullet point. Thanks, Shona. And the eligibility. Exactly the same in terms of the first box. The only thing that's changed is the budgets available. These are shorter, faster, higher tempo projects, 6-month projects between 150k and 250k. I'll make a comment about the lower bandwidths. Typically applicants apply for the higher amounts, human nature, but there is sometimes an advantage for applying for lower price projects simply because those have a higher value for money potential, and that's part of your assessment. But it also allows us to perhaps fund a smaller project when we haven't got the funding available for a larger project. So there is a slight advantage, and I'd encourage you to think about doing an application for a smaller project if you can. Thanks, Shona. Things we won't fund, these are obvious. Things that the railway can never exploit, things that don't change the level of innovation. We're looking for high rail industry readiness levels, so 5 and above. If you're not familiar with those rating scales, please check them out. Have a look at where your level of innovation already sits. We want low technical risk. We want a demonstration within a live railway environment. We need the evaluation phase I've spoken about. Obviously, your eligible costs have to be within the eligibility requirements. We don't fund activities that are already funded or are already under contract to be delivered to the railways. And you need to think about the negative outcomes, such as the negative impact on the environment or society. Thanks, Shelley. And pretty much finally from me, if you have previously been funded for a similar innovation, and the stress is on the word funded, so you may have applied for a similar innovation, but if you've been funded for a similar innovation, this competition might not be for you, so it needs to be an advancement. We've talked about the RIRL level requirements. We've talked about the requirement to deliver with a partner. We've talked about the demonstration. We've talked about the evaluation activity. We will also, Daisy and the team at KTN, organise increasingly successful exhibitions for us on an annual basis, usually in January, February, March, and we'd like to invite you to that exhibition to demonstrate, partly for your own benefits to market your capability, but also as a bit of a showcase of what has been achieved on the programme. And finally, and a bit of a low note to end on, please note the VAT requirements. If you are VAT registered, you need to include VAT, and if you're not, you're likely to become VAT registered through winning one of these projects. So be very careful not to apply without VAT, because we can't increase it later. I think, Shona, that's my last slide. Am I right? Oh, a couple more. Types of organisation we fund. Have a look at that for reference. Essentially, it's any organisation. Thanks, Shona. Oh, and the dates, finally the dates. So the competition opened on the 20th of April. Briefing events, we had a live event in Birmingham last week before last. Here we are on the 11th of May online. You have until the 8th of June to craft your application and to submit it at 11 AM. If you're successful and progress to the next stage, we might convene interviews. And again, I say might, we're not sure if we'll need interviews or not. If so, they'll be between 25th and 29th of July. And we'll let you know the good or the bad news on the 5th of August. And for those teams that receive the good news, we'll look forward to working with you from the 1st of October. Thanks, Shannon. And finally, this really is my final. We did a much longer briefing in Birmingham on the 5th of May, which I won't bore you with today, but if you'd like to watch all 3 or 4 hours of it, it is available on YouTube. You can sit through the whole of the lunch intermission as well if you want. I'm not quite sure why that's there, but it is. Please skip through that. And there is quite a lot of additional details there on SBRI, on the application process, on the way that we'll assess applications. But I would say I've passed to Shona the slides that our team presented on that day, which perhaps Shona could pass to all attendees today, and they're there for your reference if needed, as well as the YouTube presentation. And I think, Shona, am I going to hand over to Daisy now?
Yes, thank you, Kelvin. That was great. And I will definitely share the slides, no problem at all.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kelvin. I can't believe you'd say anyone here wouldn't want to sit through the full 3 hours of our briefing event. Of course, everyone here wants to do that, don't they? Thank you for going into so much detail. It's much appreciated. So very quickly, I'll whiz through these as well. I won't read them all to you, as Kelvin said as well. But we are the sister organisation to Innovate UK. So Innovate UK KTN does the, I suppose, connecting, almost dating, matchmaking side of things. So we're really here to help you with your applications. If you are successful, fantastic, then we can help you to promote, we can help you to commercialise and make further connections. If you were unsuccessful with First of a Kind, obviously I've got access to lots of other funds, both Innovate UK and otherwise, that I can help you apply for. And we work alongside government much in the same way that Innovate UK does, assisting businesses of all sizes in finding those contacts, accessing guidance, accessing support, etc., etc. So next slide, please. We have just over 46,000 unique organisations. Sorry, I did a little bit of a show off, that's fine. 72% small, and then a mix above that. We've got nearly 250,000 independent innovators in our network, and we do work with every university in the UK. So of course, being in rail, for me, that tends to be Ukraine, and lots of work with the University of Birmingham. So if anyone from Birmingham is here, hello. Next slide, please. So obviously I sit within the transport team at KTN. Our goal is to enhance the transport system of the future by creating obviously efficient, cleaner, smarter innovations, enhancing use of digital technologies and autonomous technologies where appropriate. Though I'm the rail lead, I have colleagues who work in aviation, maritime, CAV, low emissions mobility, connected mobility and more. So if any of those are of interest, feel free to get in touch, and I can also put you directly in touch with my colleagues. Next slide, please. So very quickly, I'll race through some tips for grant applications. Kelvin has hinted at or directly told you some of these already, so I won't go through them in too much detail, but make sure you're within scope. You'd be surprised how many people are outside scope when they apply, and we wouldn't want you to waste your time. We cannot flex on the scope. Agree the key points with your partners as soon as possible. Be clear and concise. You don't have a lot of space in the application process, so make sure that you have every word count, essentially. Make sure you have a realistic plan. You do have to deliver what you tell us you're going to deliver, so please make sure that you can. Make sure that you're convincing. This is a really big element of it, and it kind of links to point 8 as well, about it inspiring and exciting. The assessors are human beings, so really exciting them, getting them on board, bringing them along on the journey is really important to have a successful application. Remember risk and innovation, Kelvin's gone over. Make sure you can quantify and justify your assertions. So numbers and evidence and percentages, really fantastic to go into your applications because they're really clear for assessors to understand. So the percentage benefit or the numerical, cash benefit of your innovation, what it could provide to the sector, but make sure you can justify those. Excite, I've already said. Make sure that you get feedback and advice from KTN. I can read over your bid for you before you submit it and give you any pointers, but would need a decent amount of notice to be able to do that. So please don't leave it until the day before to send it to me. I do try to get through every single one that I'm sent, but the more notice, the better. And that links to point 10. Don't leave it too late. The deadlines are fixed, so definitely don't leave it too late to ask anything. Next slide, please. Common pitfalls. So each competition is different. Even this first of a kind competition has got, you know, differences to the first of a kind competition last year, not just in terms of scope, but also in terms of application, the evaluation requirement we now have. So don't assume that it's identical. The guidance for applicants also changes. Don't assume that you're in scope. Really make sure that you are. And again, we're happy to talk to you if you're not sure. Always make sure you actually answer every question in the application process, and then answer the question that that question holds, if that makes sense. Don't push the boundaries. You don't want to make yourself ineligible. Make sure that you're considering your collaborators and your internal team so you can deliver what you're saying you're going to deliver, and your internal team also has all the skills that you need. Again, don't leave it too late. Again, contact me. And we do also have a good application guide, which you can download very easily. Just Google KTN good application guide, and that has got a really good comprehensive step-by-step on what should be going into your bid. Next slide, please. So these slides are obviously being shared afterwards, but I can direct you to all of these as well. There are other funds out there, not just first of a kind, as much as, you know, we're focusing in on FOAK today. There are lots of other opportunities that we can direct you to from Innovate UK and UKRI as a whole. There are all sorts of different opportunities, obviously through Europa, and then procurement and contract opportunities as well. So if any other opportunities, procurement exercises, competitions are of interest, feel free to get in touch, but you'll get all those links. Next slide, please. Kelvin's already put in the link to the video, so that's a duplicate slide from us. Sorry about that. But I have put in my link. I do a monthly roundup of railway funding opportunities. That's the April one. There is a May one now, but you should be able to just jump across straight to the next article if you follow the link. And again, any interest, let me know. Next slide. And lastly, wouldn't be a presentation by me if I didn't mention Community Rail. I'm sure Kelvin finds this very entertaining, but Community Rail is a grassroots movement of community rail partnerships across Britain. They engage communities and help people get the most from railways. So there's a really strong Scottish community rail presence as well. We had some really good links with Community Rail into First of a Kind last year. One of the examples of that is Window Seater. They engaged with GWR and Community Rail Network to deliver a programme, and it's fair to say it really enhanced the offering that they had, both in terms of their bid, but also in terms of what they could actually achieve with the community on the ground, the local engagement that they ended up getting, and the fact that that project has now got kind of, you know, an unlimited lifespan in terms of who can carry that forward in the area that it was demonstrated in. So that's a particularly strong one. So I do recommend, if you've got community links or potential community links, education links, environmental links in your project, feel free to get in touch. I'm happy to talk you through some potential community rail work that you might want to engage with. Next slide. And then you've got my contact details, but feel free to get in touch, as I said, and I think we've got Q&A.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I'll just stop presenting. That was great. I'll just check the chat. I don't think we have any questions so far. I think everybody's just busy listening. So if you do have any questions on anything for Daisy or Kelvin, they'll be here. So feel free to type them in and we can catch up with them later. And if there's nothing just now, then I think we should move on. Thank you so much. That was really a really good summary, both of you. So thank you. We should move on to Scott Prentice from ScotRail. Thanks, Scott. Are you okay sharing your own slides, or?
Right, no, that's perfect. That's what I was just going to ask. While I'm putting them up, can I just apologise for the way I'm speaking? I've managed to lose a tooth today, so you just have to bear with me.
Oh no.
So yeah, going for the sympathy vote already. Has that come up okay, Shona? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'll just give you a very quick run through just the changes in ScotRail that's taken place since we were taken back into the public sector, and an overview of some of the challenges we're facing and what we're trying to do about it, and where we see the big first of a kind opportunities. So on 1st of April, what had been a franchise tendered by Transport Scotland and Scottish Government for the past 20 or nearly 25 years ceased, and a new company, ScotRail Trains Limited, took over the running of ScotRail services. So that's basically about 95% of the passenger services that operate in Scotland. The remainder are cross-border trains from companies like LNER and Avanti, TransPennine. Basically, the way it's set up is that Transport Scotland will still be in the contractual change and act as a sponsor. So they provide the policy context which we have to operate in and the funding. A new holding company called Scottish Rail Holdings has been established that is wholly owned by the Scottish Government, and we in ScotRail Trains are a subsidiary of SRH. Now, if that looks really complicated, it's actually a lot slicker than what happened before, where you still had Scottish ministers and Transport Scotland in the loop. Obviously, Transport Scotland, as well as acting as a sponsor and funder, were also the contract manager and had a franchise agreement in place with, well, until the 1st of April, it was Abellio ScotRail. But you then look at the Abellio side of the chain, and that would have been exactly the same if had it been a First Group or a National Express, where there would be a holding company, and then instead of the Dutch government, it would have been shareholders. So we actually do have a much more streamlined system, and because sometimes when you were a franchise operator, it sometimes felt like you were a child with two parents who were having a dispute with each other, just because you had your client in terms of the government, but also an owning group who also had views and everything. So this new system is definitely a lot slicker. And I've managed to put up the wrong presentation, so bear with me.
Just while you're sorting that, there's a question come in, if that's all right, Scott. There's a question come in for Kelvin, actually, from Stuart Jackson, saying that you said projects need to use live railway environments. Does that include rail lines such as Bowness heritage lines or not? Would be good to know what live means.
Yeah, you synchronise with my pressing return, Shona. So I think you can go to a heritage railway if necessary, but I think there's advantage to applicants to go to a live railway if at all possible, because ultimately that's where the innovations will ultimately need to operate. Brilliant. And there's a comment in the chat. Thanks, Shona.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, apologies about that. So in terms of background, from the timetable change next week, we'll be operating 2,150 trains, slightly less than we were pre-pandemic. We have just over 5,000 staff and a turnover of about £1 billion. In the coming year, that's likely to be split around 320 million revenue from passengers and ancillary activities, and nearly 700 million subsidy from the government, which is well over 100 million more than it was pre-pandemic. Most of our costs are fixed. Basically, there's a pass-through of about 40% of our costs straight to Network Rail. Rolling stock leases account for 13%, and staff about a quarter. When we change the timetable, you've got diesel and traction electricity in the coming year are forecast to cost just over 60 million, train maintenance just more than 70 million, and their utility costs are 11 million. We publish an annual sustainability report. The link to the website's there. It's definitely worth a read. It's a good document, and we've been publishing it for 6 years now, so you can actually see trends in terms of how we've been driving down energy consumption, how we've been improving our engagement with communities and creating wider economic benefit. So current challenges. First, basically the headline is our rail's cost to the government in Scotland is unsustainable. Our government budget for rail in the coming year or this year is 1.4 billion, which is more than a third of the total transport budget. And in broad terms, rail accounts for 2% of all journeys in Scotland. In terms of when you look at it, the government cost per passenger journey, it really isn't particularly good value. Passengers are returning. The chart there just shows a metric that we've started using to try and indicate busyness, and we're currently up to just under 14 passengers per carriage on average per week. Pre-pandemic, the level was between 15 and 17. Given that most carriages hold about 70 people, it just shows you how many empty seats we're carrying. So pre-pandemic, we were carrying around 300,000 empty seats a day. We're currently at about 350 because we've reduced the length of trains and the number of services. But it does just demonstrate those numbers, how inefficient we are as a mode. Airlines and buses wouldn't be operating to those metrics. As with the rest of the UK, off-peak travel's bounced back quite strongly and should fully recover by the end of this year. Peak and commuting coming back steadily, but at slow pace, and the market's going to be very different. We're already seeing far fewer people commuting 5 days a week, but what we are starting to see is new commuters who are making much more complex journeys for a couple of times a week, and sort of talking about people who maybe live in Ayrshire and will travel to Edinburgh and are willing to make a journey of a couple of hours and work a very long day, and the knowledge that they can work from home for 3 days a week. So current challenges, bizarrely, knowing how many people are on each of our trains at any point in time. So our newest trains are fitted with, are fully fitted with auto counters at the doors, but even they aren't great. There's always ongoing calibration and data cleansing issues. Our older fleets, only 30% of them are fitted with count equipment. And the sun, the moon, the stars comment is basically if you've got two trains coupled together working a service, which most of the ScotRail services are, the statistical probability is that only one of them has count equipment, so you actually don't get a proper load in the whole train. We've combated that by doing some big data analysis and merging ticket sales data with automatic ticket gate data to produce an estimate of actual loads on trains or peak loads on trains, and validating that with manual counts both at the barriers at stations and also CCTVs. We've also got a challenge in just understanding how customers access stations. We have limited car parking facilities. We don't want people to drive who don't need to. So just understanding the mode share for access at each station would allow us to work much more effectively with local authorities and organisations like Sustrans to improve active travel links. Last year, we were successful in winning funding for customer analytics, where we used our existing CCTV estate to basically we wanted to try and count passengers on trains and passengers at stations. It did work, but a number of challenges were found in terms of basically the feeds were very bandwidth heavy, and certainly on the train fleet that we targeted, and we deliberately picked a hard one. The quality and the locations of the CCTV cameras on the train just didn't result in good data. So we're still waiting on the trials finished about 3 weeks ago. We're still waiting on the final results, but that's a really good example of where we've provided our existing systems to suppliers in order to try something different with them. Other current challenges, nearly half our train fleet was procured by British Rail. So there are cottage industries across the country trying to repair obsolete equipment because the supply chain doesn't exist for it anymore. And for most of those trains, ScotRail are the only operator of them, so there's not even any resource sharing opportunity with other operators. Because of the decarbonisation programme, we know these trains will be replaced in 27 to 2030, which is great news, but it's just going to be a struggle until we get there. So that is one of the most pressing challenges we face at the moment. Antisocial behaviour, those who have been reading the Scottish press, and it's had a lot of attention recently, and it's not just staff assaults increasing, but customers' perception of safety and security is definitely reducing. We've set up a travel safe team of staff and British Transport Police to patrol hotspots. That's starting to make a difference, but they can't be everywhere all the time. And we, for the last year, have been running trials with trespass or using the station CCTV estate to automatically trigger alarms for trespass or linger or crowds forming. So we've got the 3 stations fitted at the moment and funding in place for another 60 odds. And that's an exact dump from the operator's screen, and depending on the alarm event, a flowchart comes up advising the operator if they have to phone the signaller because perhaps it's a trespass, or if it's a police call or just a call to the station staff. And I'll let you read that at your own pace. So things that we'd definitely be interested in supporting again, and I think we've generally had a first of a kind applicant that we've worked, or successful recipient for most of the last 5 or 6 years. But basically, yeah, on the train fleet, the list of things there, stations, still more pushing the boundaries in customer analytics, and extending the antisocial behaviour and trespass element into like counting people on and off prams, bikes, and mode share when you're arriving at the station. Train operations in terms of being able to highlight when there are certain challenges and how that delay can be attributed, and just the perennial problem that all rail operators face in terms of just integrating through software the train crew, the train, the station staff, and the maintenance teams all into a single system. And so that was a very quick run through, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. That was really interesting. We don't currently have any questions for you. People are probably absorbing all the information. So if you do, again, just the same thing. If you've got anything that you'd like to ask Scott, then no problem at all.
Could I make a quick comment, Shona? So Scott, I mean, there's some really interesting challenges there, aren't there? I think an important thing for the audience to note is that a number of those overlap with the first of a kind scope themes, but there's some which are beyond that. And Scott, we'd be really interested to discuss those with you, perhaps with a view to future competitions as well, because there's a lot of things in there that would be relevant. But the message is, make sure that Scott's outlined more challenges than there are available from the first of a kind scope theme. This year. There's always next year.
Thanks, Kelvin, and thanks, Scott. I think if that's everything just now, we can now move on to Paul from Network Rail. Is that all right, Paul?
Yes, that's fine. I'll just get my presentation up on the screen.
That's it.
That's worked, is it? Okay, let me just get this sorted. Right, great. No, thank you. My name is Paul Tallis. I'm head of engineering and asset management strategy for Network Rail in Scotland. I'm delighted to be able to help launch the first of a kind competition today in Scotland, and share some of the challenge statements that we have in Network Rail. I'm joined by my colleague Mark Geddes, who's part of our central innovation team, and he'll take you through the centrally sponsored challenge statements that are linked to the first of a kind themes. So just summarising that, really, I'm also going to give a little bit of a background on Network Rail, because I'm conscious not everybody is from the rail sector, and then go through my innovation categories that I'm looking at within the region. As I've alluded to, Mark will pick up the Network Rail wide challenges, and then I've got a brief case study of which I hope will be useful to the audience today. So Network Rail, for those of you that aren't from the rail sector, we own, operate and develop the railways infrastructure for Britain. So that's the track, bridges, signals, and some of the stations. We're not responsible for the rolling stock itself. Our vision is to always put passengers and customers first, and our purpose, we exist to help get people and goods where they need to be. And our role is playing our part in the safe, reliable and efficient operation of the railway. So bringing it to Scotland, then, so Scotland's railway covers a vast geographical area across some pretty challenging and remote terrain. So overall, Scotland's share of the railway is 17% of Britain's network, so it's a bigger proportion than our population. We're responsible for almost 5,000 bridges, for nearly 600 level crossings, over 4,000 signals. So you can see that there's a vast asset base. So innovation, rollout of technology is very important to help reduce the effort required to manage that asset base. So I just wanted to start with our themes and priorities for Scotland. So anything we do, so any expenditure or any innovation, we need to link to our themes in the region. So that everyone home safe every day, net zero by 2035. So how we're going to decarbonise the railway, net cost of the railway. So what can we do to reduce the operating cost, and then ensuring that we keep the railway open and reliable, and that's in the face of industry cost challenge that you've heard about already, and also the increasing threat from extreme weather and climate change. And around all of that, we're always looking to put our passengers and customers first. So these are 6 categories of innovation that I'm personally working on in the region. So this is not Network Rail wide or across all disciplines, but within the engineering and asset management function. So I've got digitalization and data analytics. So this is how we can draw actionable insights from our asset data, and how we can visualize it and how it can aid our decision-making process by putting that data in users' hands in real time. I've then got smart asset management. So this is quite broad. It's it's the development of tools and methodologies that will help us optimize our asset management process across the whole life cycle. Inspection and data gathering. So this is about how we can automate and improve the efficiency of our core inspection activities. I've got artificial intelligence I'm looking at. So this is how we can embed that latest technology into our processes. Decarbonisation and sustainability. So how we can use technology and innovation to reduce our our carbon emissions and embed sustainability across the asset life cycle. We've then got transfer of technology. So horizon scanning, what technologies out there that other sectors are using, which we could easily bring across to rail and implement. So that's the 6 categories I'm looking at. I'll now pass over to Mark, who will give you an update and link our challenge statements to the first of a kind themes.
Thank you, Paul. Hopefully you can drive for me. So you saw on Paul's slide that he had particular interests. Obviously, if there are areas, as Kelvin said before, that they mesh with the scope of the call, then he'd be interested to get some response from them. I've only got 2 or 3 slides here. So thank you, Shona, for inviting me along together with Paul. I'll be as quick as I can. Looking at each of the themes, the low emissions and greener railway is particularly orientated towards diesel freight and diesel passenger trains. But don't forget that if you can crack that one, Network Rail have a huge fleet of engineering trains where the same technology could be transferred. So in the background, we'll be very keen to understand what people are doing with the passenger and freight trains. When it comes to rail freight itself, the second theme, Network Rail do have an interest in there, because if we were to pick out some of the challenges from that particular theme and scope, you'll have to involve us to be able to solve it, or you'd need our support to be able to solve it. If it's timetabling and scheduling, for instance, if it's running during engineering works, well, we're the people that do the engineering work, so you'd need to talk to us about it. If you're looking at decarbonising it, improving the air quality, all of these sorts of things would need the input of Network Rail. So please come and talk to us, as well as the freight operators that you'll be talking to, I guess, along with Maggie, who's presenting later. Could we just go to the next one, please, Paul? The third priority, cost efficient and performance priorities. I'm not going to go to in any detail. I think apart from number 2 and number 4 there, we would have an interest in all of those areas, and you should look at the detail in the call, and if you think there is something there that you can solve and it's new, then please come and talk to us. So it's fairly prescriptive as to what the call wants in terms of the scope, so have a look and then come back and talk to us. And I think the final slide, please, Paul. Oh, maybe go back. Okay, so one slide that I thought was in there is, how can you get in touch with Network Rail, and what's the process? As Kelvin has said, the deadline is the 8th of June. That's not far away. Bank holidays down in the south, where I am, and other events going on for the rail industry that might take you away from actually concentrating on putting a bid in. If you need support from Network Rail, please let us know what your solution is. And just as importantly, tell us what you need from Network Rail to help us demonstrate your solution to us. Now, that might be track access that was mentioned earlier on, which could be access to all sorts of things. We need to understand that, because you need to commit in your bid to Innovate UK, and if you can't deliver, you won't get paid. So I will send, and we're hoping that you can do that via a form and send that information into us. And we would want that form to us by the 25th, 26th of May. That's not far away, but in order for us to assess what you need from us and also see whether we think your idea suits, we need to be given that amount of time so we can come back to you with enough time for you to write the bid. So I'm going to drop a little form either into the chat or send it to Shona if she can then circulate it to those people that are on the call. That would be great. Now, I can see a thumbs up there. So back to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and apologies for somehow deleting the slide you were referring to, but thanks for that, Mark. So moving on then, the last thing I had was a case study to go through, which I thought was relevant to the audience. It's related to forward-facing video, and in particular how we developed a tool to extract the data and process it in real time from the phones. So the challenge was, with the onset of COVID, and this enforced remote working and social distancing, this made it difficult for typically where we would have engineers within the cabs carrying out inspections. So we needed to come up with a method to enable that to happen, so that the engineers could carry on and perform their asset management and other engineering inspections. So how could we overcome this? So we worked collaboratively with some of the TOCs and supply chain, and we developed the AI VR tool in conjunction with a company called One Big Circle. So AI VR is automated intelligent video review. So it was a tool that effectively would capture, process, and display to our users the forward-facing video footage. So it worked by combining geospatial satellite navigation location, so GPS location, with footage that was captured via trains. And then it was transmitted via 4, or where it's available, 5G to the cloud. It was typically captured from our yellow fleet, but there's also been some trials on rolling stock and passenger stock here in Scotland. So when it's on the cloud, it's then processed by One Big Circle. So they make sure the geospatial alignment with the actual video capture. It's then made available to our staff in real time. So this is less than an hour. And they're able to access that via a secure online portal. And so far, there's a number of tools. They're quite basic at the moment, but they allow measurements, they allow annotation, they allow the user to go through the data and perform inspections and highlight certain areas with their colleagues. So some of the benefits so far, it's enabled us to provide access to the line-side environment remotely and for any rail discipline. This has got safety benefits because we can carry out the inspections we couldn't in COVID, but also carry out more efficiently, and it reduces the need to put staff on the ballast. So far, we've captured thousands of hours of up-to-date video, and it's now aligned to our corporate geospatial map of the railway. It's allowed instant, real-time sharing of the data across teams and delivery units, and it's set up with a user license agreement, so it's very easy for us to add users. Currently, I think across the whole of the UK, we have 1,300 users of the system. So for each hour you use AIVR, and the estimate is that saves you 7 hours of on-site or cab visit time. There's no specialist software training required, and it allows continual collaboration and innovation. So this is aligned to my policy of collect data once, use it many times. So now we've collected this, we can make it available to others to develop tools. So there's things like, can we use artificial intelligence to automatically detect vegetation encroachment, to use pattern recognition to detect an obstacle that's in the cess that wasn't there last time the train passed by, and then flag that to our users. So there's lots more potential uses now that we've collected the data. So that was it from me. I hope that was useful. I will open up to questions, should anyone have any.
Thanks so much, both Paul and Mark. Sorry, I didn't introduce you, Mark, at the beginning. I'm really sorry, but that was very useful, your section, as well as Paul. So thank you. There are no questions just now, maybe later. So thanks so much. You're off the hook just now. And so if we could move on to Alistair Camelford from Transport Scotland for his presentation, and then we'll, after Alistair, we'll stop for a short grab a cup of coffee break or your lunch or whatever. Thank you, Alistair. Are you okay sharing your own slides, or?
Yes, I will be. I'll just put them up just now.
Thank you.
So hopefully everybody can see that, Shona.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks very much. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alistair Camelford. I'm a sponsor in the Transport Scotland project delivery team. I've got apologies from Louise Shaw, who was intended to be on the agenda, but unfortunately she can't make it today due to another commitment. So I'm really just going to give you an overview of where Transport Scotland is with its decarbonisation action plan and what our next steps are of that. Okay, so moving on, climate change is already evident in our everyday lives. I'm sure we've all noticed an increase in extreme weather events. That includes extreme rainfall, associated flooding, more intense and more frequent heat waves, more frequent and more severe storm activity. All in, sort of exceptional is becoming the new norm. So it's an unavoidable priority for action for government. And to put it simply, we can't afford as a government and as a country not to take action. So I'm sure some of you will recognise the picture we have there at the bottom, which is a classic stormy day down at Saltcoats in Ayrshire. So just moving on, what are we doing here in Scotland? Well, with the Scottish Government, we're world leading climate change legislation across all sectors, including transport. We've got net zero emissions targets to benefit the environment, people and prosperity. Our target date for net zero emission of all greenhouse gases is 2045. And we've also got a number of government commitments. These are set out in our National Transport Strategy and also the Strategic Transports Projects Review, which is a 20-year look ahead that was published in draft earlier this year. And it's not just rail, so I'm just going to touch on some of the other modes. So with roads, we plan to phase out new petrol and diesel cars by 2030 and implement low emission zones. Be quite controversial. Aviation, we plan to decarbonise scheduled flights within Scotland by 2040 and aim to create the world's first zero emission aviation region by that date. With buses, we plan to radically accelerate the deployment of zero emission vehicles across Scotland. And with rail, we plan to decarbonise our rail services by 2035 in advance of the UK's target of 2040. And I'll come on to what those rail plans are in the next couple of slides. Okay, so what's our route to decarbonisation? We published a decarbonisation action plan in July 2020. This sets out the framework around how we'll move from diesel to green sources, and that will include battery, fully electric and hydrogen fuel cell. The principle of the decarbonisation action plan is to electrify to benefit both passenger and freight. In the main, it's electrification throughout, but in certain sections we'll need to go for battery powered trains, both as an interim and as a permanent solution, and also develop hydrogen fuel cell powered trains as a solution. So where are we now? We've got a commitment to a rolling programme that's underway. And just over the last 10 or 12 years, we've made significant progress in sections of routes that are electrified. Back in starting in 2009 to 2011, we electrified the Bathgate branch as part of the Urgy Bathgate reopening. We then went on to electrify the line at Paisley Canal, Cumbernauld, which you see in the picture there, the Rutherglen and Coatbridge line up to Whifflet, and more recently we've completed the Edinburgh and Glasgow via Falkirk High route, the lines up to Stirling, Dunblane and Alloa, the freight branch to Grangemouth, and most recently the Shotts line. It's also worth highlighting that even already, although when you see the maps it looks like vast parts of the network are still require to be electrified, over 76% of all rail passenger and 45% of rail freight journeys are actually undertaken in electric services already. Okay, the picture you see up on screen there, that is where we currently are with electrification in Scotland. You can see it covers most of the central belt, with Fife probably being the exception there. And in terms of the extents, it goes as far north as Dunblane, just where my cursor is, and in southwards extents it includes the east and west coast main lines, and the grey sections you see there as the borders that's still to be done, the Glasgow and South Western to Carlisle and the Stranraer line. So how are we going to do it? Essentially, we've got three options for technology. We've got full electrification from overhead lines with electrical multiple units or electrical locomotives in the case of freight. You see the top left and bottom right. That's the ideal solution, but it comes at a high cost. We've got a sort of hybrid solution, which will be discontinuous electrification, where trains will draw power when they're under the overhead wires. In sections where we don't have overhead wires, they will operate via battery and then recharge that battery when they go back onto the wires, or when they're waiting in stations to return their journey, or waiting in a depot to restart their freight journey. And then the third option is using hydrogen trains, or hydrogen fuel cell powered trains rather. Okay, I'll go through a series of maps showing you how we get to 2045. So by 2035, we plan to have decarbonised the network. Electrification there you see is shown in red. That may be, for the 2035 map, that may be discontinuous electrification. We're not committing to having full electrification up to Aberdeen and Inverness by these times. We're likely to have an interim solution in the section from Aberdeen over to Inverness, which is why it's yellow, and we plan to have hydrogen fuel cell trains operating on the sections you see there in green. So that takes us to 2035. If we then skip on to compare 2035 on the left by where we hope to be in 2045, everything that you see in red there, the plan is for that to be fully electrified throughout, so removing the discontinuous sections. And by 2045, what we hope that we're left with is the only pieces of the network that aren't electrified will be the Stranraer line south of Girvan, the West Highland line from Helensburgh up to Goulburn and Fort William and Mallaig, and the Far North Line out to Kyle-Lacalson from Tane northwards. That's how we plan to get to 2045. In terms of what works are underway, we've got design development underway across a number of schemes across the Central Belt, most notably East Kilbride, Barrhead, the Fife Circle lines and Borders. We've actually started implementation of works on the Barrhead corridor, so there's mass going in, there's anybody who stays down there will start to be seeing bridge works appearing, and early next year we plan to actually start implementation works on the East Kilbride line. So what are the challenges ahead for the implementation of the decarbonisation action plan? The big one up there is reducing the cost and impact of physical electrification. It is very expensive, and we need to find ways of bringing that cost down. You know, our Network Rail colleagues have got an implementation programme looking at a number of, innovation programme looking at a number of innovative ways we can reduce the cost of installing overhead line. We've got a huge volume of work to get through and a fixed end date, which is going to be really challenging. We need to pursue technologies which will reduce emissions from diesel trains in the interim, and we also have to have quite a big cascade programme, and that will be taking off some of the diesel trains that operate on the Fife and Borders route and cascading them around the country, which may necessitate some works in itself. And we've also got a huge amount of new rolling stock to procure, quite a lot of different quantities and different types, and they've all got slightly different timescales as to when to be delivered. So how can you help us? By working with us to ensure a successful and efficient decarbonisation programme. You can help us deliver innovative solutions for rolling stock, power supply and civil engineering structures. To help us realise the operational benefits, there's some opportunities for innovation there. And we also need industry's help in developing BEMU, which is battery electrical multiple unit trains and hydrogen fuel cell technology. And there's also scope for some innovation there and around how we finance and deliver our rolling stock needs. Thank you. That's really just a sort of high level view of where Transport Scotland currently is with its decarbonisation action plan. So I'm happy to take any questions that may have been submitted while I've been speaking.
I'll just check. No, I don't think there's anything for you. You're bringing back fond memories. I was involved in the Paisley Canal electrification project when I worked at Babcock, and in fact still might even first engineering in these days. I remember that very fondly, enjoyed being part of that.
Yes, I'm sure we would be, if we could get some of the outturn rates that we paid for Paisley Canal in terms of what we actually delivered, I think we'd be doing very well. But I know the work has moved on a bit since then, but it was a very well delivered project, I must say.
No, it's good. It's good to be a part of. Thank you so much. That was really useful and very informative. So we've now got to a short break. If you want to go and grab a coffee, we'll start again at past, if that's okay. And I think that will be Maggie Simpson will start at 1:30. We'll see you then. Thank you very much. Hi everyone, that's 1:30. I hope you managed to grab a coffee or something, just have a wee break. I'm not sure if you're back, Maggie, or not, but whenever you're ready, your slides are up.
Thank you very much, Shona, and thank you everyone for coming back with your coffee to talk about freight a little bit. I'm in the office today and I apologise for the fact that in advance the Wi-Fi in the office is not what it might be, shall we say. So Shona, thank you very much for stepping in to drive the slides for me, and apologies if I go wobbly or vague or pixelated or any of the usual stunts. But pleasure to be here to talk about freight and the interface with this year's FOAK programme. Next slide, please, Shona. So I think we've heard already from Kelvin and Daisy and other speakers about the three themes that we've got in this year's funding round. Obviously, theme 2, which is all about freight, I'll come on to in a moment. But before we start, I just wanted to touch a little bit on theme 1 and on theme 3. Within theme 1, you will have seen battery hydrogen powered freight trains, and I think colleagues from Transport Scotland talking about their decarbonisation strategy just before the break kind of alluded onto this, and why we may well need to look at alternative traction when we can't get access to the electrified network. So I'm not going to talk about that much more today, but I think you've got some information already from other speakers on that. In terms of theme 3, again, these weren't areas that were particularly targeted at freight, and indeed some of them are particularly relevant to the passenger railway. But obviously, if you were working on particular projects in some areas of that, and the ones that I've highlighted there, perhaps the most pertinent, you may well need to consider rail freight as well, because of course we all share the same network. So if you're looking at a system around access or around network response, obviously if you're only looking at some but not all of the trains that operate, then you won't get the right answer. So if you're looking at those, please don't forget the impact on freight as well. Next slide, please. So theme 2 is all about rail freight. We're absolutely delighted to see that there's so much content on freight this year. There has been freight elements in first of a kind before, and some really amazing projects coming through that. Some great demonstrators just in the last few weeks and months actually showing the kind of projects that are coming through and how they are really making a huge difference in terms of having those technologies available, but also in opening up understanding. There are a huge number of bullet points there around the theme on freight this year. I wouldn't dispute any of them. I think they're all important, and I'm not going to take you all through them one by one today. But what I thought might be helpful would be to sort of take half a step back from the specific bullets and talk about what's happening in freight and why these kinds of areas are really important to us, and kind of give you the context around the bullet points that we've got there. Next slide, please. So I think when I think about it, we've kind of got 3 principal themes which are dominating the agenda for rail freight at the moment. The first of these, and probably the most important, is about supporting rail freight growth. What we've seen coming through the pandemic, I think, is that the value of rail freight, what it can do for supply chains, is being understood in a way more than I've ever seen. We've got new customers who are hungry to move their goods on rail. In Scotland, for example, we've got the site for Highland Spring, which is supposed to open up later this year, and other new services operating and starting, trials of different commodities, and so on. So with new customers coming into rail freight and existing customers looking to do more on freight, how do we grow in a way that is coherent and sustainable and fits with the demands of the network, and actually delights those new customers as they come into freight, making sure that they're getting the quality of service that they demand and need. A whole host of different aspects around that, and just some examples there, but around the attractiveness of the offer, how we broker services where we've got multiple users on one train, making sure that we're efficient and cost effective to get customers at a price point that they like compared to alternative modes, making sure we're using network capacity to the best effect, engineering access to make sure that we can support freight running on the network at all times of day, particularly, making sure that we've got that efficiency in the cycle of assets overnight, and looking at new markets where rail isn't necessarily working today, but could offer something to customers in the future. Next slide, please. The key thing I think about growth in terms of customers is that they're looking to the railways to do more because of sustainability, as well as because of factors such as supply chain disruption and road driver shortage and road congestion. But sustainability is absolutely key to our customers, and they want to use rail because at the moment it's the thing you can do really to reduce the emissions in your supply chain. Road haulage, like rail freight, has a difficult journey to reach net zero. But today using rail freight is much more carbon efficient than using road freight. And that is what businesses want to see. And they're coming across to rail because of that. But of course, that also means that we need to be more efficient ourselves and to have those pathways for customers. So the themes that we've got in First of a Kind that talk about sustainability and how we can become more efficient, particularly more fuel efficient, are really important. And all the aspects of sustainability are really important as well. So noise waste, recycling, biodiversity, reduced idling, reducing power requirements for our electric locomotives, anything that helps us as a sector reduce carbon is really important. When I think about that, I suppose obviously partly that is about the pathway to 2050, those different locomotive types and so on. But also it's about what we can do in the next 5 to 10 years to be more sustainable and more efficient, and perhaps also drive cost efficiency within the businesses, which helps growth. Next slide, please. So the third area that I really wanted to talk about was how we operate as a business sector, or what it is that we do on the ground. How do we modernise our operational practices? How do we help our staff to improve their workplace? And I've said safety and conditions, but that could, by that I just mean, if you're in charge of checking a train before it leaves, you might have to walk 1.5 miles around that train. So are there ways that we could do something to help staff with that, or in yards and terminals, or keeping them inside instead of out in the rain, or things like that make life a little bit better for our staff? How do we maintain our equipment and our assets? So we're doing that to the best effect, scheduling all the work around systems and technology, right across freight, but also into, as Mark was saying earlier, from Network Rail into those Network Rail systems. Can we modernise that? Terminals and depots, how do we make those fit for purpose for the modern age? And that could be anything really, from how they operate, but also to the sort of nature of the business that happens in those terminals, different commodity sectors working together and so on. Equipment and assets, and I think, possessions was already touched on earlier, about how we work in a possession environment where we work on behalf of Network Rail with locomotives and so on. So a number of things there. And I think those three themes, obviously the bullets that I've put there are slightly different to the bullets in the themes of the competition. But what I've been trying to give you an overview there is of the things that are our priorities, and to sort of see how those specific themes then fit into the bigger picture. Thanks, Shona. Next slide, please. So just a few notes from me, just in terms of context, in terms of putting your bids together. So firstly, as I said, freight's about 10% of the UK railways, so it is a smaller sector than the passenger railway, and that means that there are fewer businesses involved, and within those businesses there are fewer people. So just remember that in terms of the scale of ambition and input that you'll get. We are desperately keen to be engaged in First of a Kind, so please do ask, but just by way of context. Secondly, it is wholly in the private sector, unlike some parts of the passenger railway now, and that means that sort of that cost and commercial viability is really key. Obviously, First of a Kind exists in a world where we're looking for products to bring them on into a world where in future they'll have that viability. That's really important if freight customers are going to, or operators are going to buy a product in the fullness of time. Obvious, but freight trains don't have seats, apart from the driver. They don't have Wi-Fi and they don't have toilets, and that sounds obvious, but I do get asked that quite a lot. So just bear that in mind. But also remember that the rail freight sector is about more than the freight operators. I know many of you thinking about this will be thinking about those freight operators, and they are absolutely keen to engage, but so also are some of the big customers, the terminals, the ports, the quarries and so on. A lot of those businesses also have rail depots, sidings and terminals themselves. So when you're looking for a rail partner, there are people out there who operate that infrastructure who are very much involved in rail freight as well, and actually have been successfully partnering in some cases on funding bids last time around. So if you've got a product or have thought about a product that would really work in a port or a terminal, don't forget that you can look for partners in that space too, as long as they meet the criteria within the competition. Final slide, please, Shona. So how can you get in touch? Just some thoughts there. You probably all know me, but if you don't, there's my email, or you can find me on all the usual social platforms. You may want to have a look at our online handbook. There is a typo there on that link. The link works. The link has a typo. That's not me mistyping my slide, but you can have a look at our handbook there. It's got a lot of contact details and a reminder there of who the main freight train operators are. All of whom work in Scotland to some degree, so you've probably got some contacts there, but if you need a name or a way in, please do give me a shout or have a look in the handbook and find some contacts there. I'm genuinely happy to help, and please let me have any questions now or on the email later. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Maggie. I'll just stop presenting. I don't know why that jumped forwards really quickly there. Sorry, the last slide.
You did it far better than I would have managed, so thank you.
No, thanks so much. I'll just check the chat, but I don't think we have. No, we don't have any questions just now again. So thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
No problem, anytime. And you know, if people who are listening think of a question afterwards, please just drop me a note. Thanks.
I will do. Thanks, Maggie. So that leaves us with Magnus from Caledonian Sleeper. I think you're here, Magnus, are you? Would you be able to share your slides? Not good when there's big silence. I think I'll just check and see if he's here. I don't know if he's online actually, which I know he was earlier. What we could do instead, if Hamish is here, Hamish from Lens Lab, hi Hamish, thank you, was successful in last year's competition, and I thought it would be really useful for people to hear from Hamish about his company and his journey with the First of a Kind 2021. So thanks so much for joining us, Hamish, especially if I'm honest, it was a wee bit of a last minute request, so I really appreciate it. I've just got a few questions.
How we operate. We operate like that on First of a Kind, and we got through it in the end, but you know.
So I've just got a few questions, if that's all right. The first one is, can you tell us a little bit about Lens Labs and how it all started?
Yeah, so our team started in 2016 really, because we began by undertaking the Hyperloop concept, and I know I think a few people in this room will have already heard me spiel on about this, but the Hyperloop was, you know, the concept we started with, where we were trying to effectively reimagine rail in a way. Trying to create that really low friction environment. We've already talked about how rail is already much more efficient than roads and other modes of transport anyway, but this was going to the extreme of it, where you even remove air resistance from the equation. But you know, after doing basically developing 3 prototype pods and taking them to those SpaceX facilities in LA that we were able to test in, so it's like a mile-long tube. So after going through that whole process, we found that actually why reimagine this, you know, infrastructure nightmare when actually we already have an existing rail system that, you know, deserves the focus to improve its efficiency and get its commercial attractiveness back again. So that's what brought us into Rail Next and started us tackling the problems of low adhesion, lack of data on the condition of the network, and allocation of capacity.
Amazing, really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about your innovation through First of a Kind, and what benefits it will bring or is bringing already to the rail sector?
Yeah, so our First of a Kind project focused on 2 of our products within our portfolio. So one was our hardware element for braking. So it was increasing the braking capability of any train vehicle by retrofitting a piece of technology, both to the wheel sets but also to the bogie. So we have multiple iterations of that, but we've ended up focusing on the bogie based one. And the other part was our software, which was about basically taking the data from those devices and data from the existing sources and collating that and being able to develop a platform, a portal for Network Rail and operators to view the current utilization, how to use the how to find more capacity, how to challenge all of the problems such as low adhesion that is found on the network and resolve those. So in terms of value of where it's in the industry, actually, we've only just completed our first of a kind project right now, and we have a number of commercial studies coming out soon. We'll be able to quantify that a bit further. But right now, in terms of performance, we have at least verified the performance of these products now.
Excellent. And I was just going to ask that, what can you tell us a little bit about what is involved in the process once you've received the notification of successful funding? What sort of are the steps that you go through? And I was going to ask where you are in the process now, but you've answered that a bit. But just a bit for people that are maybe considering it, just a general summary of what the steps are would be really useful.
Yeah, I believe it's changed slightly because it's now a stage 1, stage 2, or phase 1, phase 2 kind of project. But before, when we were doing it, it was just a one phase, single phase project. So we've just finished it. We've done the 2021 program, and we started by placing our bid, similar kind of timeframes. You had about a month and a half, 2 months to be able to put together the bid. And yeah, I mean, like I'm sure you ask about the partners and stuff and how that bit goes. But in terms of once you get the notification that the bid is successful, I don't know if this is how it will be done this year, given the new phases. But we were given about a month and a bit, basically just a month to set the project up for the 1st of July last year. And that was quite a stress. I would actually probably say to people, maybe look at the working capital requirements, because that was the bit that we, especially as an SME, a small company, just having that on hand to have it paid in arrears isn't a given. So you need to be able to put that in place, and it, it caused a few pulled hairs out trying to get that done in 1 month, but yeah, you'll get there. But you can obviously make it easier on yourself if you just plan for that. So that was one element of it. Also the partnership agreements with all of we'd already kind of started those a bit, but anybody that's in the bid with you need to have all of those finalized really before you start the project if you want to hit the ground running. Yeah, great advice. And just, I think you touched on that with regards to the application and having to have a real sector company sponsor, or I think it's maybe a partner it's called. How did you go about that? Did you use existing relationships, or how did that all come about? Just for people wondering how, obviously today's been really good because people have offered, Network Rail have offered the form and the assessment process, and other companies have offered connecting in. But how did you go about it, just for people listening today? So we had Network Rail, Ricardo Rail, and Costain all partnering with us on our one, and we had a number of other ones that we interviewed as well as part of building the bid in the first place. We met a lot of them at these kind of briefing events. Actually, that was where they started, and contacts we'd made anyway, so we re-engaged those, and they were quite flexible, really. To get within a month to be able to give like the letter of support and go about it. I think that is the easiest way to do it. I mean, in the end, if it's your project, then the onus is going to be on you to build the application and the bid and get all of that in, and basically find a place for all of the partners and make that up. So that's where all the hard yards go into. But in terms of what you need from those partners, I mean, I definitely think the letters of support were really strong for us when we submitted the application, the bid. So these kind of events, those kind of partners are the ones, like we definitely had Network Rail as that kind of owner one. I think they're definitely valuable. If you can, as Mark said, define exactly what you need from them, then that's going to be really valuable. I think they're going to struggle unless you actually define exactly what you need. It's going to be difficult for them to commit. And then the other ones were obviously very flexible because they were Ricardo and Costain, quite consultancy. They always want to be involved with the innovation. So yeah, good advice. And then finally, I'm just wondering if you've got any helpful tips or hints just for people completing the process, because I guess it is quite a short time scale, and I suppose anything that you could give a wee bit of advice on, people would very much welcome. Yeah. I mean, I think the best piece of it's all in preparation for this, really. Well, and in execution too. But I think the preparation is a bit maybe that gets underestimated. When preparing the bid, I think it's really important to be realistic about what start from the point of what you're going to deliver and be really realistic about what that is going to be. You know, we started with a 6 to 9% braking force increase was what we were going to do for our hardware. In the end, we did about 25% braking force increase is what we managed to do with the device, which was way beyond our expectations. But the amount of stress involved with trying to get that within 9 months, scale it onto a vehicle, is obviously like, you know, it was a huge pressure. And I think that is what, you know, part of the point of this innovation is to try and get that many leaps forward in the development phase. But you know, I would definitely advise being as realistic as possible about it and just making sure that whatever you commit to, you can actually deliver. Because when it's not like a grant, like most grants, you know, you set the moonshot and you'll try and aim for it and you'll get as far as you can on the way. This is different to that. It's a bit deceptive in that way. And I think Kelvin and Daisy kind of talked about it earlier. It's really important to just deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Through the project, and because it gets difficult, you have some difficult conversations.
Oh, fantastic! Great advice. That was really useful. I'm delighted you joined us, and thanks so much. If anyone's got any questions for Hamish, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. If you've got any additional things, I don't think anyone does just now, but they might be thinking about them and maybe ask you later.
Well, I'll put my email in the inbox, and if anyone wants to reach out for any purpose, just let me know.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's great. Okay, so I think Magnus is back on the call now, and he's the final, absolutely not least, presentation. Hi Magnus. Are you okay to share your slides? Or
hi guys. Yeah, so if you could share them. I'm having a technological breakdown, so apologies. So can I just check first that people can hear me because I'm on my phone now?
I can hear you, yes, loud and clear. Oh, I'm sorry you're having a technical challenge.
No, it's fine. It's fine. The joys of hybrid working and finding yourself in strange places. Okay, hi guys. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Magnus Conn. I'm the Operations Director for Circle Caledonian Sleeper. Extremely conscious I'm on the graveyard shift here, and I will do my absolute best to keep it short, snappy, and then save the sort of bullet point of the ask for the end of the presentation. So just before that, I will just set a wee bit of context as to where we are. Just picking up some of the excellent points made by Hamish, Scott, Mark, etc. You know, the railway has no money. This is an extremely fantastic opportunity. There are not many organisations and ways within the rail now to actually have the opportunity to get funding. So fantastic opportunity. And equally, any innovation, here's the reality, guys, it needs to wash its face on a life cycle cost. As Scott clearly articulated, the money tree is not there now. Life as well is all about the environment, the carbon footprint and everything we do. The realities are we are running a railway that is not sustainable in its current shape or form. So very much please have that at the forefront of any thinking. The point made as well by being extremely clear, Hamish and Mark touched on the ask is absolute key, because what nobody wants to do as well is enter into something and go down a road and fundamentally fail because it hasn't been clear up front. So the thinking on that piece of the ask from any partner you use within the industry is absolutely key, and frankly, as Hamish touched on there, may well depend on your success or your failure. So that's it. Fantastic. Shona, if you could go into the next one, that would be great. Brilliant. So just what are we going to touch on? Forgive me, I'm just going to talk a wee bit about the context because it probably helps aim and point where my question is at the end and on the thoughts. So quickly, we go on to the next one, Shona, that's great. Where have we been and where have we come from? Oh, sorry, next one. I've got one more than what I thought. Next one as well, Shona.
Sorry, have I jumped forward? Sorry about that.
No, you keep going. One more.
There you go.
There we are, fantastic. So where have we been? We commenced the sleeper franchise historically was part of the ScotRail franchise. The Scottish Government decided when they bid the franchises and split back in 2015 that they wanted to split the two, recognising that what the sleeper franchise is something very, very different to what anyone else does. And fundamental principles behind it were, because it's was historically a very, very small part of the ScotRail business, effectively separating it out and allowing it to be a key focus for a private organisation to actually take it forward and give it the love, care and attention that it needed. So Circle Caledonian Sleeper built it. What was our key focus around the build? It was new rolling stock. It was massively challenging. We ran a competition. The only manufacturer that was interested in what is a small bespoke fleet was CAF, who were Spanish built. They were new to the UK. Whilst they knew how to build heavy rail trains, they challenged with the introduction because they hadn't done it for 20 years. And what were we building? We were building what is most probably the most complex train on the UK network. So we had a number of technical challenges to overcome. What could possibly go wrong? A train with 30,000 litres of water on it, a train with 464 hotel rooms, a train with well in excess of 250 toilets on it. So we had some challenges, but the good news is now we have overcome the vast majority of them. We're performing well. We keeping the wheels moving very well, and we're comfortable that we're exceeding all our targets there. Still some challenges that are being addressed from the customer focus side. So all very interesting. What does that mean? And from an environmental perspective, we have designed the train very cleverly and carefully. It is a power intensive train purely by the nature of what it is. Where a normal train will have an HVAC system to control the temperature of one aluminium tube per coach, we are trying to control the temperature in 12 different areas within the same coach, allowing some people to have hot temperatures, cold temperatures, and somewhere in the middle, which brings its challenges. And here's the reality: it is power hungry. We also run the longest train in the UK. The train starts as a 16-car formation out of London Euston, heading north with our Lowlander and our Highlander services, and the same in reverse, where a number of smaller sections come together, ending up in forming 16-car trains. So what that actually means from a traction perspective, bearing in mind we are one of the few remaining passenger operators that has a locomotive at the front. We need a power intensive loco. There is only one in the UK that is approved and designed that will provide the necessary power to power our train. So that all sounds fantastic from the engineering people, but it doesn't sound very good from the environmental perspective. What have we done to minimise that? So we've done some very clever engineering. When I say we, I don't mean me, I mean the team, where effectively we've put a lot of load control management software on the train, where if you use the analogy, if you walk in a building and the lights come on, basically that's how the train works as well. If we are not using an area, we won't be providing power to that area, only when guests are using it. How do we manage the train? Again, with its complexity, and it is extremely complex, we have remote diagnostics on the train. So we can see 24/7 exactly what the train is doing, everywhere it's doing. And we've taken that to the next level now, where we've engaged with an artificial intelligence company, where we are working with them on a big package of work just now, where effectively, rather than just being told by the remote diagnostics as to when the train's in trouble, it tells us proactively that when there's an issue before it becomes a problem. And even more cleverly than that, it tells us which particular component in the system is about to give up the ghost, to give us a time to make an intervention before anything actually goes wrong. So that's in its development stages, but currently it's got a 97% success rate, which is massively encouraging. So all very interesting. What does that mean? It means probably actually there's been a lot of clever thinking done in the past 6 years on the coaches. I'm not really interested in focusing on that bit just now. The locos, a different situation. Where are we just now? Alistair touched on earlier the 2035 decarbonisation plan for Scotland. This will have a very significant effect on Caledonian Sleeper, on the basis that fundamentally the key routes we run north of the central belt in Scotland are going to be dug up over the next 13 years. And that brings with it a number of challenges, as you can all imagine, especially with us being a nighttime operator, where depending on how the works are undertaken, the potential effect on us is significant. As ever though, with challenge comes opportunity. So we are working closely on that. The other thing for us with the routes we ran, as Alistair put up earlier, the West Highland main line where we run from London Euston up to Fort William. That will never be electrified. So therefore we have a position over the coming 10 years where some lines will be electrified and some won't. So what does that mean for us? Sleeper is one of the only 2 exceptions that has effectively an exemption within the 2035 decarbonisation strategy, where it's recognised the specific bespoke nature of challenges we have, and then therefore we are not as bound by the legislation. However, regardless of that, it is not a sustainable solution to carry on doing what we are doing just now, which is we run the electric locomotive, the Class 92 up to Edinburgh, at which point we put on some 1960s built diesel traction, which are fitted with 21st century modern Euro 4 compliant engines. But regardless of that, that's not good enough. So we are working currently through a plan where effectively the strategy is that over the coming years, we will be replacing the 2 traction concepts with effectively 1 traction concept that will allow us to do both. And as Network Rail electrify the infrastructure, that will allow us to flex our operation to actually meet with when the infrastructure goes up and gradually chip away as the overheads go up at our carbon footprint. The last bit, just for the next slide, is our carbon footprint. What does it mean? Something I had not thought about, and only until the clever people got involved. The sleeper train, again, is unique. And what's unique is when you look at our carbon footprint as a business, we can also include the footprint of a hotel room, because obviously what you do not need is a hotel room if you're travelling on a Caledonian sleeper. So where that actually puts us when the clever people run the maths is that we are in a position where actually we are better than normal trains, and we all know trains are far, far, far significantly better than aviation, road, etc. So we start from a good base position, even the fact we have diesel traction and we have a plan for how we are addressing that going forward. Next slide, please, Shona. If you keep going. Thank you very much. So what are we all about? I'm not going to read from the slide. This is really what we are known for, back to the unique nature of our business, as well as doing everything that everybody else has to do. I have to make 464 hotel rooms every night. I have to put 30,000 litres of water on the train. I need to take 30,000 litres of water off the train. I need to undertake maintenance exams. I need to undertake repairs. I need to undertake modifications. I need to undertake tyre turning. I need to do all the things that everybody has to do. So really our organisation is minute by minute when this train comes in the morning to actually get it turned around in a perfect 5-star state for that night before is an extremely delicate and extremely planned second by second almost operation to make it all come together every night. And the good news is I think we are in a good place now. We're now 4.3% ahead of our contractual target on right time performance with our client Transport Scotland. Next one, please, Shona. And critically from that as well, what does it mean for our guests? The good news is our guests like what we do. Even pre-pandemic, we were getting the trains busy. And again, another unique feature of Caledonian Sleeper, and no one would have written it 2.5 years ago, whilst Scott and numerous other operators face the same challenge with regards to the way we live and the way we work and the changes that has made on patronage. Where we're slightly different is what we have seen is whilst we have suffered from the business market slightly, although it's picking up on our Lowlander services, from the Highland staycation perspective, the train is pretty much full, and it's full for weeks and months ahead. So ironically, in a perverse way, it's been a fantastic, good, sustainable story for Caledonian Sleeper. But equally, back to Scott's earlier point, do not forget we're a very heavily subsidised franchise. So we don't make money. This is about how much less money we lose as a result of the trains being busy. Our future, where do we want to be? If you could go next, Shona. Fantastic. So as I touched on there, we are plans in place. There's a number of options. We're doing lots of modelling. We're looking at procurement. We're speaking with partners. We're doing all sorts of clever traction models. We're doing power requirements, all the things you would expect with looking at the future of an OE local. So I guess that really comes to my ask and my question. And that is really that actually park the train just now. The challenge we have, as with the majority of colleagues and other train operators, is that the vast majority of our footprint obviously surrounds the actual traction and the coaching stock itself. But my question is, we've come on a journey where we've done what everyone else has done and we've replaced plastic spoons with wooden spoons, and we've looked at the supply chain and we've made sure they've got environmental plans. But what I'm really looking for is what innovation is out there just now that doesn't involve modifying the trains, bringing new locomotives, anything like that. What is out there that I'm missing that people could bring to the bespoke and unique operation at Caledonian Sleeper? So it's a very wide question, and come back to the point made earlier, within the boundaries of the competition. I am genuinely quite open to anything that's non-traction wise that would help reduce our footprint and advance the major shift of electrification and new traction for the Caledonian Sleeper. And that is really my ask, Shona.
Oh, sorry, fantastic. Thanks so much. That was really interesting. It's so interesting also that you are filling, like, it was really interesting, you're filling all the beds even into the future. That's amazing. So people obviously love the sleeper. I know my children absolutely love it. It's a big treat for them to go in the sleeper. So we use it. It's a great service. No, thanks so much, Mag. That was great.
Not at all. And I think, you know, just on that as well, we always have some room. But I think what's happened here is with the staycation market, you know, sleeper has been, it used to be known as the little secret. And with a lot of people using it last year, a lot of that secret's getting out there now as well. And then obviously with the new rolling stock as well. So yeah, no, it's a good news. Perversely, it is a good news story.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. You don't have any questions specifically, Mag, so you're off the hook. That's your if anyone has got any questions in the future, though, I'm sure all the speakers would be happy to help. So if you think of anything going forward, please give us a shout. That just leaves us, we've finished a little bit early today, so you get about 20 minutes back of your day. I just want to say a big thank you to all the speakers, Kelvin, Daisy, Scott, Paul, Mark, I remembered this time, Alistair, Maggie, Hamish and Mag. Thank you so much for your time today and your presentations, which were really useful and clear, and I reckon will be hugely helpful for people considering first of a kind, and also just with general information about the Scottish rail sector. It's been a great session, so I'm really appreciative of all your presentations, and also Hamish, it was great to hear from you, because that gives people practical, you know, tips and from somebody who's been through it before. So huge thanks again. We'll share the link to the recording with everybody, so that for people that in the rail cluster that missed this event, they'll have a full recording to be able to watch, which obviously we're going to encourage them to do because there's so much information in it. And any of the documents that you've asked us to share, Network Rail, with your form, that's no problem. We'll make sure that goes to everybody on the call too. And if there's anything else that anyone needs help with, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And apart from that, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon.